But this incident occurred in the, well, no, it's not in the, but it's about the Mogollon monster. Now, I know some people say it's pronounced Mogollon, but that's not how it's spelled. And I'm officially declaring that Mogollon is now and forevermore pronounced Mogollon. That's the official pronunciation. Let the comments pour in. Let the hate pour in. I'm calling it Mogollon. Here's what he writes. Arizona has a Bigfoot cryptid that we call the Mogollon Monster. I first heard about it in 1974 when I was in the Boy Scouts. That summer at scout camp, we heard the story of some previous fellow scouts who encountered a Bigfoot back in the 1940s. Camp Geronimo is nestled along the Mogollon Rim near the town of Payson. Let the comments pour in. I know I mispronounced it. It's a prime Arizona camping hotspot. The story is well documented in newspapers all over Arizona. These days, I'm a retired correctional administrator with sons of my own in the Scouts. And in October of 2019, 2 of them were Webelos, and we were about to cross over to Boy Scouts. We were embarking on what was to be one of the last camping trips as Webelos. Timber Camp Recreation Center is located along the eastern part of the Mogollon Rim on US 60. My other 2 sons had come with us on our weekend excursion in support of their brothers. We arrived at 8 p.m. We'd left right after the boys let out of school, but it was a long drive. And since we were among the last to arrive, our choices of camping spots were limited. We picked a spot away from most campers along the fence line against the Ponderosa Pine Forest, and by 10 p.m., we'd set up our camp, and we'd built a fire and were relaxing a bit before turning in for the night. One by one, my sons grew tired and went to bed, but I stayed up a while longer. I needed to unwind. Around midnight, one of my sons woke up to find his air mattress had gone flat. I pulled it out and set it aside so I could find and patch the leak in the morning. Meanwhile, we aired up a replacement. By now, it was 1 a.m., and I was beat. I looked around as I watered down the fire, and I noticed all the other campers were dark. Everyone was apparently asleep. It was then that I heard footfalls on the other side of the fence line, inside the trees. I had on a pretty good headlamp, but I couldn't see anything or anyone moving about. I gave up and got inside the tent to go to bed, and as soon as I did, I clearly heard more footfalls. I grabbed the big 6D cell flashlight that turns night into day, and I went back out to investigate, and I pointed the light at the forest, but again there was nothing there. Nothing but dead silence. I left both Coleman lanterns on so we could have some light outside to see any shadows if anyone approached our area, and then I went to bed. When we woke the next morning, I discovered the flat air mattress was soaked with what smelled like urine. I thought the boys had taken turns hosing it down during the night. "What'd you do that for?" I asked them, and I was a little irritated. They all looked at me like I was nuts. None of them had left the tent during the night, they said. It was too cold and no one wanted to leave his nice warm sleeping bag. The next day was Saturday, October 26, 2019. And I spent that day trying to figure out what I'd heard the night before. I found what appeared to be a track in a portion of soft soil inside the tree line 100 yards from our camp. We brought a 21-inch campfire grill, so I measured a stick against that and compared it to the track. It appeared to be 16 to 18 inches in length. Whatever left that track was apparently stepping across an 8-foot wide ravine. It looked like it had been trying to push up out of the creek bed, and I took a few photos. Back at camp, I was telling the boys about my discovery when one of the twins told me that something strange happened to 4 of the boys who had arrived early and had gone on a hike the day before. My boys went and got 3 of them so they could tell me what happened. The first boy said that 4 of them had gone on a short hike along one of the trails leading into the forest, They'd been hiking about 30 minutes when all 4 boys saw what they called a very tall monkey. A tall monkey, I repeated. Yes, the boy answered, a hairy monkey. How tall was the monkey? I asked. The boy pointed to a small 8-foot tall pine tree. He said, it's that tall. Are you sure? I asked. Yeah, all 4 boys answered at once. The monkey thing did not look happy, the first boy continued. She showed us her teeth. What 10-year-old kid would make that up? I stood there in amazement, knowing these kids weren't inventing this, not with this amount of detail. I've listened to enough YouTube videos to know that the lip curling behavior is mentioned on occasion as a form of intimidation. You said she. What did you mean by that? I asked. Well, the first boy answered. We could see that she didn't have any guy parts down there. His face reddened a little, and she had, and now he pointed at his chest region, embarrassment spreading across their faces. Boobs, I supplied for them, like a woman. Yeah, they answered in unison. Well, how did she show you her teeth? I asked next, and they each curled their lips in a sort of snarl. And I continued to ask questions. I needed to know all that they remembered. What color was she? I asked, and they all agreed that she was dark brown or black. One of the kids said he could see hair on her arms was a bit long and moving in the wind. How much hair? I asked, and they said, well, it was like a monkey. It had hair all over, but very light in the face. There the skin was kind of gray like the hands. Well, did you see anything else? I asked. They said it just stood there in the trail staring at them. It didn't move closer or farther away. It just stood there for a bit. Then the first kid said, and then after a minute or two, it turned around and started walking away, and then it was gone. It walked into the forest, I added for clarification. No, they all answered. It disappeared. The first boy said it was walking away and it had just disappeared on the trail. This was not the first time I'd heard about Bigfoot and portals. By now, I was sure there were too many details for kids to make up, and I asked if they had told their parents, and they said they hadn't. We didn't want to get in trouble, one kid said, so we didn't tell anyone. You're the first person we've told. And then after that, they left. I made a short video recounting everything they told me. It was the first eyewitness encounter ever told to me. I wanted to make sure that I remembered it. Oh, sir, where's your video? I'd love to see your video. This area of the Mogollon region is just rife with stories of this creature or these creatures. And it seems to have the legend of some kind of paranormal, orb, I don't know what you call it, the going in and out of portals and things like that. It's very interesting. I'd like to see this area. I don't want to live in the desert, but I like to go to the desert and visit for short periods of time and look at the beautiful scenery. I'd like to go here and see what's going on in this Mogollon area. So, and you know what? Just because I've officially made Mogollon the correct pronunciation for that word, you can still use Mogollon if you want. You have my blessing on that. I just want you to know. All right, here's another short story that I thought was great, and it's titled Full Moon Society of Hikers. I don't know exactly where this woman is from. Oh, she's from New York. I assume she's in New York because the story is set in New York. She writes, I love dixiecryptid. The stories are amazing. Your narration voice is fantastic. And the nature videos are beautiful. Thanks for doing what you do. I purposely am going to put some nature videos in while I read the story on because she likes them. I live in the Catskill Mountains of New York. I hadn't really thought twice about Bigfoot, but my boyfriend has believed and pondered Bigfoot's existence for a long time. I've always believed that there's a whole lot of more mystery and enchantment in this world than we realize, and that the true nature of reality is not as firm as we tend to believe. So when he played me a few of the videos of possible Bigfoot sightings and audio recordings, I watched and listened with an open mind, but I didn't think much beyond that. In 2020, I had a small group of female friends that I would gather with on every full moon. We would do a little moon magic and then head out into the woods to hike under the moonlight. Hiking is always a pleasure, but hiking at night with just the moon to light your way is extra special. As we hiked, we would listen to the rambling rivers and the wind in the trees, or we would just be chatting it up as friends do. But on this specific night, we chose to take an old carriage trail. The Catskills are beautiful terrain, and a lot of local trails are narrow and rocky. The carriage trail is wider, and so easier to walk in the dark, and as we made our way, everything felt normal, and we fell into a little peaceful silence. But then, from 15 to 20 feet away, from off the trail and up in the woods, came a seriously loud and thunderous whoop. It started low and it got higher in frequency, and we all immediately looked at each other in shock and flipped on our headlamps. My two companions immediately wrote it off as some sort of bird call, and they didn't want to consider it any further than that. But I could feel that the creature who made the call was close by, and I recognized the call too. It sounded just like some of the Bigfoot recordings I had heard before. My instinct was to speak to the creature telepathically, and then I thought clearly, "We mean you no harm at all. We're just passing through, and thank you." The whoop had sounded like a, "Hey, you're in my territory" kind of warning, and I don't think it was meant to be especially threatening. As I thought my message of coming in peace over and over again, I felt that the creature heard me and understood. And this was a special full moon night. Yes, it was, and what a great little email this person sent me. I really enjoyed reading this. And I appreciate the writer for sending it. Thank you very much, ma'am. All right, I have a really, really good story here. I stumbled across this a couple of days ago, and I couldn't wait to get it out to you guys. So this is a ghost story, and it's really good. It's really good. The title is "A Ghost in My Grandparents' Kitchen," and here's what the woman writes. It was the summer of 2001 when my family moved into my grandparents' house, nestled in the heart of North Georgia's Blue Ridge Mountains. After retiring from her Coast Guard career, my mom wanted to help my grandmother care for her grandfather, who was in the final throes of Parkinson's disease. I was 11 years old at the time, and my 9-year-old sister Nikki and I spent our idle summer mornings pushing one another in the tire swing swung up from the weeping willow tree in my grandparents' front yard. In the afternoons, we raced Granny's golf cart around our grandparents' property until our mother called us inside for dinner. It was an idyllic and carefree existence. My sister and I shared a bedroom which was positioned in the back of our grandparents' ranch-style home. Our room connected to the kitchen through a laundry room, and it was a short walk through the kitchen down the hall to our evening soiree with Granny's bedroom. Our grandmother had insomnia, so she was usually awake long after the rest of the family had gone to bed. And each night since we moved in, Nikki and I snuck out of our bedroom to hang out with Granny in her room. She would make up funny stories, and all three of us would laugh the night away, and we loved spending our evenings with her. Nikki and I lay completely still in our shared full-size bed, eyes closed tight and slowly exhaling and inhaling. We were determined to convince our parents that we were fast asleep, and we didn't dare move until the crescendo of our stepfather's snores and our mother's labored breathing reverberated through the wall adjacent to our bedroom. Our nightly charade was about to commence. "Sounds like they're finally asleep," I whispered through the clenched teeth. "Yeah, I think so too," agreed Nikki. "I'll crack open the door and check if the coast is clear, and then we'll go hang out with Granny." I tossed aside the handmade quilt we were tucked in, and I rose out of bed and gingerly crept toward our bedroom door. I pushed the door ajar, careful not to let the creaking hinges give us away. The second door, which separated the laundry room from the kitchen, was also closed. The absence of light gleaming through the crack at the bottom was a good sign. No one was in the kitchen. "I think we're good to go. Let's go," I instructed Nikki. I cracked open the laundry room door while my sister untangled herself from the quilt and tiptoed across the room to join me. I took the lead as we pushed open the kitchen door, ready to take the brunt of the punishment if we were to get caught. As the two of us prepared to slink through the kitchen, we were stopped dead in our tracks. Standing at the stove in our grandparents' kitchen was an elderly woman dressed in a white sleeveless nightgown. The overhead lights were turned off, so she was illuminated only by the light above the stove. "Granny," I called out to the strange woman. The old woman wrenched her head around to look at my sister and I, and it was in this moment that we realized the woman was transparent. I searched her face for any trace of familiarity, but was startled to find an empty space where her face should have been. My heart began to pound against my chest, and I could feel the prickle of goosebumps making the hair on my arms and neck stand up. Fight or flight set in as I squeezed my sister's arm and anxiously whispered, "Run!" We bolted past the translucent old woman and dashed down the hall toward Granny's room. The hallway seemed endless as we sped toward her closed bedroom door. "Please don't let her be in there," I thought as I threw the door open. I desperately wanted to believe that was our grandmother standing in the front of the stove in the kitchen, and maybe we had just not recognized her with the lights out. We burst through Granny's bedroom door, and much to my dismay, there was our grandmother laying in her bed, nestled up with a bowl of pretzels, reading the latest edition of the National Enquirer. "Granny, there's a woman in the kitchen," Nikki and I squawked in unison. She barely glanced away from her magazine as she responded, "Oh, you girls saw her. Well, yeah, that's Miss Oglethorpe. She used to live here, and she died in the sunroom." And then she promptly returned to reading her magazine. Well, our jaws hit the floor. "You've seen her before?" I asked in astonishment. Nikki and I were frozen in place, unable to wrap our minds around what we had just experienced. Our grandmother, so casually confirming our encounter with this ghost, did little to ease our minds. Granny informed us that she had seen Ms. Oglethorpe a few times in the kitchen and had also spotted her relaxing on the sofa in the sunroom where she had passed away. The fact that we had been unknowingly living in a haunted house did not sit well with my sister and I. Neither of us were in the mood to hang out after our run-in with Miss Oglethorpe. We were instructed to put the sighting out of our minds. Nikki and I were too shaken to sneak out of our room for any more evening get-togethers with Granny after that night. Several decades have passed since our unexpected run-in with Mrs. Oglethorpe, and I have never been able to put her out of my mind. I cannot help but wonder if she purposely revealed herself to my sister and I that evening as a way of deterring us from sneaking out of bed. Perhaps she knew what we were up to and wanted to let us know that we were not as sneaky as we thought we were. Whatever the reason, to this day, neither of us can walk into a darkened, empty kitchen without slight apprehension and the haunting memory of a faceless old woman waiting for us. Oh, I love that story. That story was so well written. I only had to change a couple of words that I couldn't pronounce, but it was perfectly written. It was perfectly structured and put together, and it was exciting. Don't you agree? Wasn't that a great story? I wanted to share that with you, and thank you so much to the writer for sending this. It was just a joy reading it. Thanks. Thank you all for joining me on this podcast. If you think it's good enough, hit that subscribe button, hit a thumbs up, leave a comment, but leave a nice comment. It doesn't have to be nice to me. Talk about the stories, because they are really good stories that people send in to me, and I'm just the reader. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast. Thank you.